Hello everyone and welcome back to the course Project Management. Today is lecture 2 and it will be about planning and network scheduling techniques. So let's review that project management is planning, integrating and executing plans. Yes, and because of the short duration and often prioritized control of resources require formal detailed planning. And the integration of the planning activities is necessary because each functional unit may develop its own planning documentation with little regard for other functional units. So in general, you can describe planning as a function of selecting the enterprise objectives and establishing the policies, procedures, and programs necessary for achieving them. So planning in a project environment may be described as establishing a predetermined course of action within a forecasted environment. So the project's requirements set the major milestones, and if line managers cannot commit because the milestones are perceived as unrealistic, the project manager may have to develop alternatives, one of which may be to move the milestones. And upper-level management must become involved in the selection of alternatives and make decisions whether to accept these changes or not. And project manager is the key to successful planning, and it is desirable that the project manager be involved from project conception through execution, but that's not always the fact. So you can be a project manager assigned in the beginning, hopefully, maybe in the middle or closer to the end of the project. So, and you should be understanding that it's not so easy to come into the project in the middle. So project planning must be systematic, flexible, enough to handle unique activities, disciplined through reviews and controls, and capable of accepting multifunctional inputs. And if you are a successful project manager, you need to realize that project planning is an iterative process and must be performed throughout the life of the project. Yes, that's why we will cover in the first half of the lectures predictive approach, which requires a lot of planning, and then we will discuss what are the advantages and disadvantages of this approach, and the second half of the course will be about agile approach or adaptive approach. So we want to define all work required, possibly through the development of a documented project plan, and it should be known to each project participant. And it is a necessity in a project environment because if the task is well understood prior to being performed, much of the work can be pre-planned. And if the task is not understood, then during the actual task execution, more knowledge is gained that in turn leads to changes in resource allocations, schedules, and priorities. And the more uncertain the task, the greater the amount of information that must be processed in order to ensure effective performance. And as we already know, project has a lot of uncertainty, and by doing planning, we're limiting this uncertainty to the desirable level. So, and if we don't plan, then we will have negative consequences, such as project initiation without defined requirements, and then as you execute the project, then you will clarify the requirements that will lead to changes in the project. Wild enthusiasm, disillusionment, chaos, search for the guilty, punishment of the innocent, and so on and so on. Yes, you can read that from the slide, and as you can see, there are many negative consequences of bad planning. And here, as you can see, the project planning and control system. And as you are doing the planning, you need to think about scheduling, yes, all the activities, and then as you execute your project, you need to compare whether you are behind schedule, ahead of schedule, or you're going with your schedule. because all these differences, you need to think about them and understand what kind of impact these variances might have on the project. And planning is determining what needs to be done, by whom and by when, in order to fulfill one's assigned responsibility. And there are 9 major components of the planning phase, which are objective, yes, a goal, target, or quota to be achieved by a certain period of time. Program, the strategy to be followed and major actions to be taken in order to achieve or exceed objectives. Then a schedule, a plan showing when individual or group activities or accomplishments will be started and or completed. Then you also should check your budget. Yes, planned expenditures required to achieve or exceed objectives. And it's often that you might have problems with schedule or the budget, and you need to think what kind of actions you should take in order to go according to your plan. Then forecast, a projection of what will happen by a certain time, and then when there are changes, you'll need to update your schedule with all the required resources. Then organization, design of the number and kinds of positions along with corresponding duties and responsibilities required to achieve or exceed objectives. And also you might encounter the problem that people that you've started at the beginning of the project, you may end up with different people at the end of the project. Also, you need to set a policy for decision making and individual actions, procedure, method for carrying out a policy, and then standard, a level of individual or group performance defined as adequate or acceptable. Okay, and in order to help you with pre-planning, especially during the initiation phase, usually project managers, they prepare project charter. Here is an example of project charter. Yes, so probably for medium project, because it's very short. So it has responsibility, who is responsible for what, and what kind of actions will be performed on this project. And the bigger the project, the more detailed project charter you want to have. So, and here's a definition of the project charter that needs for the documentation of the project manager's authority and responsibility, especially for projects implemented away from the home office. So it's more like internal legal document identifying to the line managers and their personnel the project manager's authority and responsibility and the management and or customers approved scope of the project. And theoretically, the sponsor prepares the charter, but in reality, usually project manager prepares project charter. So what project charter should include at the minimum? Yes, identification of the project manager and his or her authority to apply resources to the project, the business purpose that the project was undertaken to address, including all assumptions and constraints. Yes, so probably you want to gain a new market share on a new market or expand the line of your products. Summary of the conditions defining the project, description, brief description of the project, objectives and constraints on the project, then project scope, yes, what will be included in the final product or service and what will be excluded, key stakeholders and their role, what are the risks, so probably like a minimized version of risk register, then involvement by certain stakeholders. So, and if it's a big project in a big company, then you want to have a more detailed project charter. So, and you can include the scope baseline or scope statement, scope and objectives of the project, specifications, WBS, work breakdown structure on the template levels, timing, approximate timing of the project, spending plan, yes, taking into account S-curve, Then the management plan, resource requirements and man loading, yes, if known by that time. Resumes of key personnel, organizational relationships and structure, responsibility assignment matrix, yes, who is responsible for what, who should be informed, yes, RACI matrix. Then support required from other organizations, project policies and procedures, change management plan, and management approval of above. As you can see, depending on the type of the project and organization, you might have a minimum version of a project charter or quite detailed project charter. Let's move on to the next topic. Let's continue our lecture with network fundamentals. Yes, so we talked about the planning, and while you are planning, you need to think about the network. Yes, so management is looking for new and better control techniques to cope with the complexities, masses of data, and tight deadlines, which are characteristics of highly competitive industries. And you want, as a manager, to use better methods for presenting technical and cost data to customers. And scheduling techniques can help you with that. And there are several of them. And the most known and used Gantt or bar charts, milestone charts, line of balance, networks, PERT, program evaluation and review technique, then arrow diagram method, sometimes called the critical path method, CPM, precedence diagram method, PDM, and graphical evaluation and review technique. And also you can use some kind of hybrid of these techniques as you see fit. While you are creating your schedule, you need to think about interdependencies. And network analysis can provide you with valuable information for planning, integration of plans, time studies, scheduling, and resource management. So the primary purpose of network planning is to eliminate the need for crisis management by providing a pictorial representation of the total program, or at least reduce uncertainty, because anyway, as you execute your project, you will be changing your schedule. So, and by looking at the schedule, you can obtain this kind of information: interdependencies of activities, project completion time, impact of late starts, early starts, trade-offs between resources and time, what-if exercises, cost of a crash program, slippages in planning performance, and evaluation of performance. As you can see, you can get a lot of information, but it depends on the level of your schedule. Yes, so if you put a lot of time and effort, you can create a schedule where you can get all this information, but you need to think whether what kind of level of details is needed for this type of project. So, and when you're creating such networks, they're composed of events and activities. And these are definitions for the event, which is equivalent to a milestone indicating when an activity starts or finishes. So usually you will have milestones in your schedule, and they show that, for example, as a milestone, it's like point in time event. And I can give you an example that approval and signing of project charter will be the milestone for the end of the initiation phase. Then we have activity, the element of work that must be accomplished, and duration, so the total time required to complete the activity. Then we have effort, yes, the amount of work that is actually performed within the duration. So the duration can be like 1 month, but the effort could be just a 2-week period within the duration, yes, due to interdependencies. Then critical path, which is the longest path through the network and determines the duration of the project. Yes, so the main thing is like when you are looking at the critical path, you will understand the whole duration of the project, which is the longest path. So it is also the shortest amount of time necessary to accomplish the project. Okay, now let's look at some visualizations. So here is standard PERT nomenclature. So we have event, number 6 and 3. Then we have activity, which will take 3 weeks. So from complete testing to complete final report, it will take 3 weeks for the project. Also, when you are working on your networks, you might have burst points or sync points. So burst point is, in this case, on the top is number 26, activity number 26. After completing this activity, you can work on 3 other activities. Yes, so activity 26 gives a burst to 3 other activities. And then after finishing these 3 activities on the bottom of the diagram, then you can see after finishing activities 31, 18, and 7, you can start working on activity 26. And it's a good representation to understand interdependencies between various activities. So, and here we can see that we can start with a bar chart at the beginning and then convert it to PERT chart. Yes, so first you will start with a Gantt chart where you have the beginning and end of each activity. Then you can add a milestone chart, which will show the end of the activities. And then when you combine Gantt chart with a milestone chart, you will get the PERT chart. And from PERT chart, you can understand what is the critical path of the activity and what is the duration of the project. And here is a visual representation of a PERT chart. And also, you'll need a table where you will check the sequence of the events. Yes, so we have 4 columns. In the first column, which is activity, you can understand the order of activities. Then the title. Yes, so in this case, we are using letters. Then immediate predecessors that will show us the interdependencies. So, for example, unless you finish activity A, you cannot start activity B and C. And then in the 4th column, you can see activity time, the duration of each activity in weeks. Yes, it can be in days, in weeks, or in months, depending on the scale of the project. So, and in order to convert the charts into PERT networks, you need to answer the following questions. What job immediately precedes this job? Yes, what are the dependencies between various activities? What job immediately follows this job? And what jobs can be run concurrently? Yes, and once you understand these relationships, then you can create a PERT network. And also pay attention to the critical path, which is vital for successful control of the project, because it tells management 2 things. Because there is no slack time on the critical path, any slippage will cause a corresponding slippage in the end date of the program, unless this slippage can be recovered during any of the downstream events on the critical path. Yes, so if you delay any activity on the critical path, it means that the duration of the whole project will be extended. Because events on this path are the most critical, management must take a hard look at these events in order to improve the total program. Now let's take a look at the example of a PERT chart.